If you're a student scrolling through job descriptions thinking, I can't apply for this, I don't have enough experience. If you're ambitious, motivated, ready to work, but feel like everyone else has better internships, better connections, better grades, or a better story, this episode is for you. Because today we're dismantling limiting beliefs that can hold you back as a student or in the early stages of your career. That you need permission before you can start building credibility. That experience only comes from job titles. And that opportunity only opens after someone gives you a chance. Here's the truth. The experience gap isn't real if you know how to play it. And by the end of this episode, you will understand how to start building evidence of skills before someone hires you, how communication and collaboration make you employable faster than grades alone, and how to position yourself as valuable even if your CV feels empty. One of the shifts you'll hear today could completely change how you approach your future. So let's get inspired. Welcome back to Inspiring Entrepreneurs. I'm Katie McNair, Marketing and Communications Manager from Strathclyde Inspire. And today's episode, we're going to be addressing a common concern for students and those in the early stages of their careers, that they might not yet have the experience they need to compete. We've got two amazing entrepreneurs who have built careers by creating value early, learning fast, and working at the intersection of people, systems, and opportunity. They're ready to show you how to build credibility, confidence, and opportunity. Colin Fraser is a Strathclyde alumnus with a digital and CEO career spanning 4 continents. Former co-founder and partner of Nevis Capital in Sydney, Australia, Colin is now Glasgow-based, where he is the co-owner of 3 fitness startups and a consultancy firm prepping companies for the future of work. By the age of 30, Gavin Bell had founded, scaled and sold Yatter, one of the UK's leading paid advertising agencies, guiding it through to successful acquisition by Velstar Group in just 3 years. Today, Gavin advises companies worldwide on scaling sustainably, systemising growth and building businesses that create real enterprise value. Together, we're exploring why the experience gap isn't real if you play your cards right, and how communication and collaboration can shape your career success.
This episode of Inspiring Entrepreneurs is sponsored by SEMA, the world's leading and largest professional body of management accountants.
Colin and Gavin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, thanks very much.
We're going to dive right in with our first question. Colin, I know you're passionate about forward thinking, about spotting opportunities and challenges on the horizon and helping to prepare people for the future of work. So this kind of thought leadership, I would imagine it requires quite a lot of self-confidence and a willingness to throw ideas out there that maybe others haven't necessarily seen coming yet. And as it's not really possible to be an expert in things that haven't happened yet, you're maybe working in a space where experience in that traditional sense isn't necessarily possible. So what advice would you give to students and those early in your career about how to build credibility without years of experience under your belt?
Yeah, thanks. It's a really tough question to answer, actually. I was thinking about this over the last few days, and it is there's a fine line, I think, between feeling like you are confident and experienced in something and having credibility. I think credibility for me comes from your willingness to try. And I remember back to even my time as a student, and there was a lot of things that we tried to do, failed miserably most of the time, but we had no loss of enthusiasm for the next thing. And I think that's where you get credibility. It's your credibility and your ability to keep going, explore things, be open to the art of the possible, and not having a sort of like something that brings you down, something that stops you from moving forward. I think if you're constantly trying to move forward, that can be helpful. And credibility is kind of, I think, sometimes in the eye of the beholder, right? What you think that you need to be credible in something might not be the case, and it's really difficult to tell, what someone else is thinking. And if they see a confident person who's trying things and who shows an ability to get back up again and try again, then I think that's half the battle, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk quite a lot about resilience and how it can help you, the understanding that you're not going to get it right every single time, and that's actually part of the process, and that if you were to get it right every single time, you're maybe not actually putting yourself out there enough. So being able to learn from the failures, or being able to learn from the things coming over the horizon that you haven't dealt with yet, and leaning into uncertainty can be a really useful skill. In your opinion, why are new graduates or those at the start of their career path actually extremely valuable to companies?
I think, well, there's a lot of good reasons for it. I think, I mean, we were talking earlier about the speed of change, the pace of change, and it feels like we're in a sort of rapidly accelerating world, and it's accelerating away from even our generation, which is like not that far away from, or really from young graduates. But the time that they're spending now with, particularly with AI and new tools, like that has rapidly changed since we were, at university. And that's one of the thinkings that, the mindsets that I would want to get from a new graduate, which is the ability to look down the barrel of what is completely unknown to people, try and grapple with it, get your head around it, try things, practice. I think a lot of the early adopters of technology years later, they look like they're professionals and experts in things, but it's because they spent so much time in the sandbox, dabbling and trying and making mistakes, and do it in a secure enough fashion that you don't cause too much damage. And that practice and that mindset coming into a company is super valuable, because that flows through to everybody else. And it's got a knock on effect of like what is possible, and staying positive for the future. I think we've got quite a challenging sort of negative speak from the media and from what you see in the papers and what you read politically about what's going on in the world. And I think we need to combat that as much as possible with people who want to try and make things better in some way.
Absolutely, because the new generation coming through arguably are the most invested in the future. They're the ones stepping into it, so they're going to want to shape it in a way that makes sense for them. Gavin, you're someone who built a hugely successful company in your 20s and you scaled it at speed. So, in your opinion, what's the hidden cost of waiting until you feel ready, if you like, to make a start with your career, whatever you're pursuing?
Well, I think the idea of being ready is a bit of a myth. I think when you look at leaders and entrepreneurs and people that maybe look accomplished, it's easy to think, oh, they're ready, they know what they're doing, they've got everything sorted and nailed. But actually, I think the real skill is not waiting to be ready or being ready. It's the ability to take action even though you're not ready. It's something I personally learned was that if you're a new leader, a new entrepreneur, it's very easy to second guess yourself. Am I doing the right thing? Is this what an accomplished leader or entrepreneur would do? And you second guess because it's your first time doing it. It's your first time going through that experience. But looking back in hindsight at the first business that I've run now, most of the decisions I made were gut, and most of them tended to be good decisions, or decisions that I could at least pivot and change. There's no decision or action that we took that I had wished I had more time to be ready before I made it. So I think the hidden cost is that people are going to be waiting too long to get started, to wait for this feeling of being ready, which will never come. Um, and something else that I learned is that the more you progress and the more experience you get, actually the feeling of being ready just continuously moves away. The goalposts continuously move, so you will never feel ready. And if you're waiting to feel ready, you're just wasting time that somebody else has started and is making progress on you.
You're making me laugh a little bit. I'm thinking about the fact that sometimes I think conversely, the more you know just highlights the more that you don't know. And so almost the feeling of ready does get further away than at the start when you're in some ways a little bit blissfully unaware of
Absolutely.
the pitfalls that you could fall down, or, the stakes might be a little bit lower at that stage. So in some ways, hitting it with a running start is a great way to go, and might be easier than a huge shift when you're already deep in it, I think. So what helped you avoid the kind of procrastination we talk about, this worry of, well, maybe I'm not quite ready yet. I should just try and level up a few skills. I should maybe do another course. I should find myself a mentor. I should go along to a few events. There's so many things that people can do. There's a lot of noise out there. I'll watch TikTok for a while because they'll give me some advice, things that people can do before they just make a move. So what helps you avoid that kind of procrastination and just get going?
I think probably the ultimate thing was knowing what I wanted to achieve. So I had a vision, an idea on what I wanted to achieve. And in business, at least, or in fact, in any career, you're judged on results. And I think I was guilty of anybody of watching Instagrams and TikToks and scrolling on social media, pretending that I'm doing market research or whatever it may be. But that isn't going to generate results. The only thing that generates results is taking action. And so, I think there's probably an element of everybody will go through periods of procrastination. That's fine. But you need to be able to show something. And I come from a sporting background, so perhaps there's an element of that whereby, I want to win.
Right.
I want to achieve things. I want to get results. So knowing where you want to go, and then putting in actual action that generates a result to get you closer to that, you'll soon find yourself out if you're procrastinating, because you'll see that you're not. The easiest leaderboard in business is typically money. Is this business making money or not? That's the easiest way to look at it. And so I've got an idea of where I want to go. Is the actions I'm taking here actually generating income or generating interest in the business? Yes or no? And I think being able to reflect on that, maybe on a daily, a weekly, a monthly basis, to see, is the action I'm taking actually generating a result? I think that's an important skill for anybody to have.
Absolutely. The driver of money absolutely can be that, and that will to win. And then, of course, people bring things like they might bring their personal values in terms of, I want to feel like I'm creating value for this particular section of society. We were talking at the start, I think, about before we came in here, about problems that you'd found with that were maybe inspiring you towards what your next steps would be, beginning with that problem and seeing there's something here that I could make better, and I could do it in a way that helps this section of society, whether that's customers or people in your community. And then as well, it will provide value for me. It gives me purpose. It gives me a sense of the win. And if it's sustainable, it's also going to be hopefully generating some revenue as well. Colin, when it comes to talking about experience and this idea of when people are at university, I think people are getting the experience of their subject learning. And there might be internships in there potentially, or there might be work placements. But thinking of those first steps you make, and you're sitting down with your CV and you're trying to think about where you're going to go next. If experience isn't just your job title or the internship you've had, what other types of experience do you think people can lean on and talk about, maybe in their interviews when they're trying to make those first steps?
Sure. Yeah. Great question. I think I'm probably a bad example in some ways because I think I just, at that stage in my life, I had an inability to say no
Right.
to things, which, and as you get older in your career, like your ability to say no gets more and more powerful. But at that stage, I saw, I was walking along the street out here because I went to Strathclyde Uni, and I saw a poster. This is probably about a long time ago, shall we say, a poster for, an internship opportunity in Japan, and 4 months of language learning and 8 months working in a company. I'd never really thought about Japan at this point. I wasn't into anime or manga or know any Japanese. I just thought, oh, that's quite interesting. So I applied for it. And when I went to tell some of my professors, I'm planning on taking a year out. I was in between my 4th and 5th year of my engineering degree. And there was a lot of anxiety about that decision, about this is a critical time in your academic career, and if you move back a year, you're going to be in with a bunch of people you don't know, and this could really affect you. I said, that I'm doing this. Like I'm going. I'm not going to miss this opportunity. And I think there are so many places you can look in for charity work. You can look for work in your community. You can look for experience with friends and family. You can ask people who have small businesses if you can go and shadow them. There's so many places, and it doesn't have to be from an entrepreneurship or a business perspective, because those skills that you pick up, even doing voluntary work at a soup kitchen, and the people that you meet along the way and how you communicate with them, like that is a fascinating set of experiences that you can then use in the rest of your life, the rest of your career. Those picking up those stories, and it comes back to this point about um, being able to keep your eyes open, and spotting opportunities is not actually about being able to spot them. It's about being open to the fact that there might be an opportunity, because people walk past opportunity all day long, every day, and they just don't have their eyes open to it. And I think, you know, don't be the person that walks past that poster and says, "Oh, not right now," or "It's too hard," or "I don't speak any Japanese. Like, how could I possibly do that?" Like, just try anyway. And I think that's where the skills that you'll pick up doing that will serve you in good stead wherever you go next.
That's interesting. It seems like you actually both talked a little bit there about going with your gut. You were talking about going with your gut with the decisions you were making in terms of your business. And then, even though the academics or the people around you might be saying, oh, Japan, really? And you'll come back to a different class and will you be behind? Will it feel like you're behind? But your gut told you that this is something that's going to be valuable and you
Yeah.
took that opportunity. So having a bit of self-confidence in your own.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting one. Like, I've been reflecting this a little bit recently. I don't think that there are many people, and maybe you're an exception to the rule, Gavin, um, that know in their early 20s what their purpose is, right? They're not, in fact, many people in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, they still don't know what their purpose in life yet is. And you see people who in sports, footballers and stuff, like this is all they've ever dreamt of. This is what they want to be. And they're fortunate enough to know their purpose in life. I've been reflecting on the majority of people who don't have that. How do you get fulfillment out of both your personal and your professional life without purpose, or without finding the thing that you're sort of sent to do, sort of thing? How can you get fulfillment? It comes back to that of being able to feel, uh, you know, not temporarily, but sort of in a moment fulfillment of like, this feels like the right thing to do. And it's a bit of gut, but it's also a bit of, um, taking opportunities that feel like they're kind of, the right thing for you.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of, I would imagine you've probably both been through experiences where you're sitting at the table hiring people and you're thinking, who are you going to need to join your team? What kind of experiences make someone valuable to an organization?
For me, I'm less interested in experience and I'm more interested in personality and culture fit. So everybody's going to have a different personality, different culture, and that's great. I'm interested in, is that person going to fit into the culture that we're creating in an organization? And but there's two traits I think that again, I was reflecting on this in the drive in, that stand out for me, and they're actually both incredibly simple. I think the bar is just so low in finding great people, that if you can do these two things, for me, you stand out for everyone else. So the first one is being proactive. Are you somebody that when you join our team, or in fact before you join the team, if you simply send me an email to say, I've applied for this job, here's a little bit about me, you're going to stand out from all the other applicants because no one else is doing that. So being proactive. Then when you join the team, are you coming up with new ideas and new solutions and bringing new ideas to the table? That's the first one. The second one for me is simply just being reliable. Are you somebody that will do what you say you're going to do? So if you say you're going to do something, then it gets done. For me, as an employer, that builds trust, which is the most important thing that you can have in a working relationship. But if you're somebody that says you're going to do something and you don't do it, then that starts to erode trust. And if you can't do a thing, then so you can't do it, because that again builds trust. So for me, it's those two things. It's the proactiveness and reliability, the trust that I'm looking for.
I think that that makes so much sense. And this feeling of people have talked about this quite a lot, the idea of the bar actually being lower than people might think. And if you just take a moment to personalize and to think about what that hirer really needs from their perspective, not necessarily from your perspective, and thinking, well, I just want this job. Why might they find it really helpful to have you there, and make sure you communicate that value, whether there is that you are going to be very responsible, whether it is that you're the new ideas person, that you're willing to reach out and make that first communication, I think could be so valuable. And that leads me on to my next question, actually. How can communication become a credibility building tool? Because you might know that you are a credible individual and that you can deliver, but how can you make sure to communicate that to the people around you who you might want on your team or a team you want to join, to make sure that people understand your value?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because I think they're actually, um, I think there are lots of, especially larger organizations that will struggle actually to sift through the thousands and thousands of applications that they get. And I think it is a very tough job actually to figure out who is going to be the right fit. And oftentimes, I think we've got a lot of AI tools now that are supposedly helping, but I'm not sure they
Mm.
are. I think a lot of it comes back down to, is the person able to kind of get across their message succinctly? And I think with everyone being so time poor and looking for keywords and things like that, I think if you manage to get yourself through the hardest stage, which is that you pass a CD check, that's now, and there's huge amounts of resources at the university of how you do this. If you get past that first check, I think when you're communicating with people, it's about being coachable in my world, where when you come at a problem, you come at it from a perspective of not a sort of deference to other solutions, but being aware that there are other ways to do things, and being open to the possibility that um, that people can be additive to solutions, right? And so I think coachability comes across as one of those weird intangible things, but when you see it um in sports people, or you see it in people who are at the top of their game from that they're musicians or athletes or something, um, they have an ability to be coachable. And it's hard to put your finger on exactly what that trait looks like, but it's someone who listens and responds and sees what's in front of them, and then is able to take that on and either adjust their thinking, or be added to, or be open to something that was completely new to them before. And that's a really important communication skill if you get to interview stage,
Right.
is can you showcase how you are coachable.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. It's another one of those skills that we talk about quite a lot. We talk about communication. We also talk about collaboration and the ability to be able to do that with teams of people who might not necessarily be the same as you. Because we see with the research coming out of Hunter Center that having a team of people who are actually quite different can often bring better results than a team of people who are the same. Might be an uncomfortable process to get there, but it's going to overall be better because you're getting these different perspectives rather than all just heading towards the same direction. So, how do you think collaboration can teach students or early stage professionals beyond the subject knowledge they receive in lectures and labs? What can collaboration and experiential learning of that kind, or if it's being a self starter and going out and doing something off your own bat, collaborating with people who might not be the people you see every day, help you move forward?
I'm thinking if you're going to do anything big, successful, then you're going to have to do it with other people. Whether that's working in an organization and you're going to have a team, or whether that's hiring people and you're bringing a team in. So the ability to work with other people it's probably, again, it's one of those very simple, boring, but extremely important traits in a person. And I think the coachable element is a huge one, in that I think everybody in a team needs to be able to be coachable. Because if you're going to have a team of people, especially a team that have different views, potentially different backgrounds, you are going to clash. But it needs to be within a culture where the clash is productive. So more of a culture of candor as opposed to, arguing. And that's a good thing, because if you can sit around a table and you can have disagreements and then a solution comes out of those disagreements, I would argue that solution will always be stronger than, 10 people around a table that all agree we're just going to go this one way. So, the simple trait of being able to communicate, drop the ego, and collaborate with others is vital.
Yeah. And in your experience, what kind of projects or roles or environments tend to compress that kind of learning the fastest so that people can really hit the ground running when it comes to their first roles?
For me, I think it's when you've got skin in the game
Mm.
and there's stakes. You're on a football pitch, you've got to win the game. So you have to learn, you have to work with others in the team. In a business environment, you've got competitors that are trying to steal your customers. You're with your team, you've got competitors again that are trying to steal your talent, your team. So you have to, there's stakes there. When you leave university, for example, you want to start earning money. And for me, my personal was that I had to make money. I had to make it work. And so every minute of every day was focused on a goal of trying to make enough money to pay the bills at the end of the month.
Right.
And I think that if you're too comfortable, you won't grow. So there has to be an element of discomfort there, which typically comes from when you've got, there's stakes involved.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. When you said it, I was laughing a little bit, because I think the unfortunate reality for this one is that kind of hardship is what breeds like really interesting shared experiences. And if you want to talk about compression of getting to know people, when you go through really difficult things, or you go through these experiences where you're out of your comfort zone or you're scared of things, then that's when people come together the fastest. You watch TV shows of people going on, going through SAS courses or being in the jungle or something like that. I took a team of students to Belize when I was a student, and we spent 6 weeks in the jungle in Belize. And I can tell you, like, those people that we had to collaborate, we had to find ways to communicate properly, and you can form kind of lifelong friendships from doing things like that. But it's tough, right? And this idea that you need to make money, or you have something that scares you or you weren't comfortable doing, you have to be able to get out of your comfort zone in whatever way. There's lots of different ways to find that, but I would challenge people to think about doing one thing that scares them every month, and if you do that, then you're probably got more opportunity for these things to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thinking about your own entrepreneurial journeys, because we haven't spoken about them very much. So please, and feel free to give us a little bit of insight from your personal experiences. Were there any big moments when you had to tackle a task or overcome a hurdle before you felt qualified to do so? And how did you navigate that discomfort?
Yeah, I think every decision, I didn't feel qualified. It's gone back to the start. It's you never feel ready, and if you wait to feel ready, you'll be waiting forever. You have to be able to take action and make decisions without having all of the answers, and be comfortable doing that. And I think that the best entrepreneurs are the ones that are able to maintain a calm when everything else is chaotic around them, and business is chaotic. So you as a leader have to remain calm. But I think probably the biggest one, or the most recent one for me, was when we sold the business. And I'd built this business up. I'd been running it for a few years. I knew how every element of that business worked. But then when you come to sell it, and you then have other people doing due diligence and interviewing you essentially to buy it, it's quite nerve-wracking, because you're going, this is the first time I've sold a business. I don't know what they're going to be asking for, looking for. I don't know how to approach it in terms of, do I pitch? There's so many questions I didn't know, or I wasn't ready for. But the only way you do it is you just throw yourself in and know that you will pick up the answers and the experience as you go along. And that's all I can say is you're never ready.
Did you use mentors at all, or ask advice of other people who had been through similar things, or were you really out there just navigating?
Yeah, I mean, whenever I've had a challenge in business, I've always sought a coach, and I've always sought out who's the person that's been through this before that I can pay or shadow to try and fast track my learning. But there still is a moment where you have to say goodbye to them and go out on your own. Um, they won't hold your hand through actually going through the process. In terms of selling, we had lawyers and accountants who were there, but it's still you that have to make the final decisions.
Sounds a bit like parenthood as well. That thing of you go through, you've never been a parent before, and now you have a human being, and you can't go back, and you have definitely skin in the game on that one, and you just have to muddle on.
It's like when you were talking your response earlier about shared experiences and going through challenging things. I thought about parenting,
Yeah.
because you can read all the parenting books in the world, but until you've got a baby in your arms and you go home from the hospital for the first time, that's when the real learning happens.
How about you? Any big hurdles or moments when you were faced with something and you thought, I just don't necessarily have the reboot for this?
I think the thing is, like, there was quite a lot of moments where, things like I was explaining earlier, where especially when you seek information from people and that they might have a perspective that's counter to where your gut's telling you to go. There's a number of times where I've like taken on new opportunities. I became a first time CEO when I was out in Australia, and almost everyone around me advised me not to do it. And even though I thought this is a great opportunity and I really like where this company's headed, everyone that I spoke to said, this is going to be a real painful kind of next few years of your life. And to be fair to them, they were probably correct largely. But I think for me, it was about realizing that there's always information asymmetry, right? And if you recognize that there's information asymmetry, like they will always know something that you don't know, but that doesn't actually help you, nor should it influence you necessarily as to what you're gonna do, because regardless of that, like you still got to experience it for yourself and pick up the information and knowledge for yourself. And once you've tried it, then you're like, you can go back to those people and say, yeah, you're right. I didn't see that coming or whatever, but it was a useful experience to do. And I think if you operate in the mindset of there's never going to be a time where I 100% I'm confident with a decision. Probably there's some doubt, and there'll be people casting doubt on that. That's okay. And you can still go forward with those things, and you can still pick up the learning. Whether it was the right or wrong thing to do is kind of irrelevant. Like you're still going to move forward from it. And I think that was probably the big one for me of going from I wouldn't say it was cushy, but going from a corporate job into really a completely different kettle of fish and having to raise money. And then we sold the business, and I was doing everything for the first time round. And with 25 people who I'd only met a few months previously, looking at me for answers, and that was tough.
I think it's that moment of realizing you're learning in public and you have 25 people or however many people looking to you because you're in charge, so you must know what opportunities can come from that, being the person who is leading the ship with the expectations of everyone around you and into uncharted waters. You've not necessarily done it before. What opportunities can come from learning in public?
Well, I think the thing that comes to my mind is ego, and in that if you're not comfortable learning in public, then it's your ego that's holding you back. Because Yato was a really interesting business because we got to see under the bonnet for so many different businesses when we were running their advertising. And what you realize is even the businesses that you think look great, look like they've got everything together, when you lift up the bonnet, they don't. It's a mess. It's chaotic. And realizing that sort of gave me the learning of you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be able to throw yourself into opportunities. And like Colin mentioned, when you're going through things for the first time, or you make a decision and people are saying don't make that decision, it's okay after months, weeks, years, whatever it might be, to say, yeah, you were right.
Right.
There's no problem with that. For me, if you see, the problem is when you see, is when when your ego holds you back from learning because you're worried about what other people might think. That's a real challenge. I think that's one of probably the biggest problems I see in society, is that we live in this Instagram world where everything has to be perfect. But the reality is nothing's perfect. And so being confident enough to put yourself out there into the world when you don't have all the answers, I think people actually really respect it. And in a world of AI, where I think everything's going to be even more perfect or seemingly perfect, people that are a little bit rougher in the edges will probably stand out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, did you get anything wrong early on or later that you feel like students could shortcut, or is failure really a necessary part of the process?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I think because so many things that happen in business or in life are sort of non-repeatable, right? And everyone's circumstances are so different. Where I think of it now is kind of what I'm able to bring to organizations, or the person who I am today has been shaped by all of those things. It goes all the way back to childhood and things that happened, and I wouldn't be able to have the ideas and thoughts and experiences that I do if it wasn't for the combination of all of those things. And so I think I couldn't point back to any one thing and be like, oh, here's what not to do. And I would also never. I'm not the kind of person who would say to people, oh, you should avoid this or you should avoid that, or be careful that you don't make that mistake, because in your circumstance, that mistake might be the exact thing that you need to propel you on the right path. And so I would caution people against that. But I guess the only thing that I would say is if you're making sort of like life-changing decisions, like make sure that you've got guardrails up. And this is like we talked about this in the AI workshop, where if you're dabbling with something for the first time, a new tool or something in your business, and you let it rip on your finances, or your HR documents or something like that, and you've not got enough safety up, enough guardrails around the thing that you're doing, you're exposing it to things that can really have like detrimental effects. It might be on your health, or you lose your house or something. I think if you're doing those kinds of things, then you want to be really careful about what information do you have to hand, and have you sought the right kinds of advice. Not that people would tell you not to do it, but to have your guard up, and go into those really important decisions like fully eyes open. You can still do it, but I encourage people to make those decisions for themselves. I think looking back, um when I was coming out of business school, one of the things that I got taught was never take a personal guarantee on anything. I must have like 1,000 personal guarantees now, on things, and my house is up as collateral in all sorts of different places, but I went into it knowingly, and knowing that what my backup plans are if things go wrong, and where I can get out of things, and what I would need to do. But you really have to be mindful if you're going to go and take that kind of approach to life, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you have anything to add?
Yeah, I similar to Colin, I wouldn't have a specific do this or don't do this. We spoke before coming on that my first business was a total failure. And what that taught me was, in hindsight, that failure is only a bad thing when you see it as an end point. Like, I've failed, and therefore I need to go and do something totally different. Whereas if you approach failure as something that you can learn from and then use the information that you've gathered to pivot or move on to something else, then failure, I wouldn't ever say it's a good thing, but you can spin it to be a positive. And so for me, anytime there's been a mistake or a failure or failed business, it's never been an endpoint for me. It's simply just been all right, that didn't work. Let's try this. It's I think that the definition of failure is simply just not getting the expected result from a series of actions. And so you just simply take another series of actions to try and get a different end result. And if you see it like that, if you see it as a journey, then it's just a little fork in the road.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a really healthy way of looking at something that can be unpleasant to go through at the time, but it's not the end of the story, absolutely. Or if you let it be the end of the story, then that's what you're going to be left with, as opposed to moving forward and finding a way to approach what you've learned, that being data, as opposed to the end of the story. It's been great to hear these kind of longer form answers and the insights you have from your experiences. We usually do a little section of just rapid fire where you can give as short an answer as you'd like. We've got 3 questions in this section. So, one sign that someone will succeed long term.
Ambition.
Okay.
Yeah, resilience, I think.
Resilience. Yep. One thing to avoid because it's just a massive waste of time.
Complaining. You will achieve nothing.
Over procrastination.
Okay. One piece of advice you would give your student self if you could go back.
Trust your gut. You're going to go on a journey where you don't have the answers and you're going to second guess every decision you make. And that's a heck of a waste of energy. So just trust your gut and be confident with what decision you make.
Just keep moving forward.
Self-trust and move forward. It's been brilliant. I have one last question. And because you're both people who are always looking ahead to the next challenge, the next solution, in your opinion, what opportunities are on the horizon right now for the next generation? What's something that listeners could do that will position them for success in the future?
The obvious one for me is AI. But that doesn't necessarily mean learn everything. Well, I think everyone needs to actually learn AI, but you don't need to build a career in AI. For me, I'm technologically minded, but not overly technical. And so, coming out of Yatter and going into different business, the way that I was thinking about it is, what business can I go in that can use AI, but isn't going to be disrupted by AI? And that was, everybody was coming out telling me you need to go into AI. And actually I thought, no, I think my skill set's in what I just mentioned. So having a grasp of the landscape of artificial intelligence, I think, is probably what everybody's saying, but probably saying it for the right reasons.
Right. Yeah.
I may give an answer that you weren't expecting, possibly. Maybe sound a little bit counterintuitive from my background, but I would actually think that the opportunity is for people to lean into what makes them uniquely human. Like, we have now a world where everyone has the ability to have the sum of the entire knowledge of human race, like, at the click of a button on their phone. They carry around with them every piece of, knowledge is now no longer the problem. In fact, even the application of knowledge is now no longer the problem, because you can ask tools, how do I do X? And it will probably tell you. So I think leaning into figuring out, what in an individual sense, what makes you uniquely you? What can you uniquely bring to the table that AI can't? That's where you'll find a sweet spot, because everyone has to augment themselves to be able to be on par with everyone else. But to really shine, I think we need to figure out what is our unique humanness individually, and everyone's will be slightly different, and every organization will need something uniquely human about them to be able to function properly. And you probably, in your business, you see that a lot, like some unique human creativity that could never have come from AI, because it's so intrinsic in who we are. That's what I think people should be figuring out how to do better at.
Actually, I'd echo that, even though we said the opposite answers, because I think if you understand AI, you can then, you know the landscape of being uniquely human to stand out from the
Other gaps.
So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah. So lots of almost in opposite directions, lots of opportunity in the horizon. And I think it's quite a hopeful way to finish. So thank you so much both for your contributions today. It's been a really, really valuable conversation. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks very much for having us.
Here's what I hope you take from today. Experience is not something you wait for, it's something you build through projects, communication, through collaboration, and through creating value before someone asks for it. Colin and Gavin have shown that careers don't start with permission, but instead with participation. With getting involved, solving problems, and working with people, learning how to communicate clearly and collaborate well. Your future is not built by your background, it's built by what you practice. And so, if this episode has lifted some pressure, share it with someone who's been doubting themselves, because the people who succeed fastest aren't always the most qualified. They're the most engaged, the ones who start before they feel ready. Thanks for listening to this episode of Inspiring Entrepreneurs. If you found anything that we said useful, we'd love for you to leave us a review wherever you listen. It really helps other viewers to find us. And check out the rest of the series for tips on everything from how to move from being invisible to being in demand using LinkedIn, and learning from experts why AI won't steal your job, but you should still take the time to learn how to use it.